So guys, I've done something I am not proud of. And not only did I watch the entirety of BatFam, but I also made an adaptational accuracy list for it. I'm starting to think I may have a problem. I cannot stop ranking adaptations. Please, someone help me. I've been ranking random people in the streets by how similar or different they are to comic characters they resemble. I nearly got arrested for yelling at a random police officer for being a terrible adaptation of Lady Cop. He was not happy. So if you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, BatFam is a new animated series about Batman and the Bat family. But instead of using any of the iconic, beloved, and popular characters associated with the Bat family, we follow beloved characters like a de-aged Volcana Bruce has adopted, and some completely original niece of Alfred's who moves in. However, there are still a lot of Batman and other DC characters in the show. So though I may need to wash it after subjecting it to the filthy horror that is BatFam, I've used the 3C system to rate every character adapted in from comics or other media to this show by how different or similar they are to their source material. With those C's being, for those who don't know, costume, character, and continuity. Costume rates a character's outfit or costume, their overall look, and their superficial physical characteristics. Character rates their personality, their relationships with others, and their powers or abilities. And continuity rates their origin story, their iconic moments, and their overall place in the world, universe, or timeline. And after doing so, I've ranked all of the characters in this show, from the absolute worst adapted all the way up to whoever the best will turn out to be. Most of us discovered and fell in love with these characters in our childhood in a show, movie, or game that portrayed them to us in a way that stayed faithful enough to the comics that we've been able to continue loving these characters all through our lives in many different forms. Being for a younger audience doesn't mean the people making this show should just not give a shit. As a kid, would you really want to watch these cartoons be made by people who don't give a crap about the material they're even working with? So, let's start with the first, at the absolute bottom of the list, with a dishonorable mention who I cannot technically put on the ranking, but starts even lower than the worst adapted character on this list, Selena. So in comics, Selena Kyle is Catwoman, a jewel thief who is a villain and love interest to Batman. She's worn many costumes through the years, from purple draping cloaks to skin-tight black catsuits. She's one of Batman's oldest and most iconic foes, debuting only a year after Batman himself, returning time and again across the decades as both a villain and hero well into the modern day, as one of not only Batman, but all of DC's most popular and well-known characters. In BatFam, she's the family cat. They share nothing in common, as one's a human jewel thief with a complex morality, personality, and backstory, while the other's a cat. And while in comics, Batman and Catwoman have an on-again, off-again intimate relationship, depending on their situations and her current alignment, luckily in the show, they do not adapt that aspect, due to her being, a cat. Though now that I think about it, he did very strangely kiss her before leaving in one scene. Oh, I cannot in good conscience declare that this is not just a weird-ass reference for some random reason, despite the fact that we have no reference or implication of any human Selena Kyle existing in this universe, and I think it'd be pretty weird to name your cat after your girlfriend, so evidence does point to this being what we're gonna get in this universe as Catwoman. Some random family cat Bruce Wayne fuck. So moving on to the official ranking, starting at the absolute bottom of the list, with the worst adapted DC character in this entire show by far, Cyclone. In the comics, Cyclone is Maxine Hunkle, the granddaughter of Ma Hunkle, who operated as the Golden Age hero Red Tornado. After gaining powers of her own to control wind, Maxine works alongside the Justice Society of America as Cyclone, taking inspiration for her name from the Cyclone kids who used to assist her grandmother back in the day. She's a socially awkward girl who overcomes her anxieties to make friends with heroes both old and new alike and finds a family in the JSA, dedicating herself to helping to fight against villains and help the innocent whenever she's needed. This one I take as a personal insult. So disclaimer, children and pregnant women may want to leave the room for this next part. The fucking asshole cocksuckers making this show don't give a wet donkey shit about any of what I just said about Cyclone. As not only is she a villain in this show with no connection to Red Tornado, one of the earliest female superheroes and an iconic part of DC Comics history, whoever wrote this god-dang shit just had a lame-ass idea to do an all-girl Earth, Wind, Fire, and Water supervillain team for Volcana to work alongside in one random episode. So, after doing all the work of typing in, DC girls with wind powers, then saw a character who matched their criteria for having wind powers and tits, and so tossed her apathetically into this show and called it a day. But they clearly didn't do any more research into the character than taking one look at her current Wikipedia image. Because if you look at the Alex Ross art of her on there and compare it to the show design, you can see that they thought the wind blowing up her dress and hair in that one specific image was just how her costume and look normally was. We have finally found the official, fantagonistic, most hated adaptation of all friggin' time. This is everything I fight against and hate about these kind of people, all wrapped up into one little package. When Black friggin' Adam did a better job at the character, you know you're a lazy, disrespectful motherfucker. Alright, enough of that. Next up to number 23. We already have the main character of this show, Damian Wayne. In comics and the show, Damian Wayne is the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, and the grandson of Ra's al Ghul, and that's about where the similarities end. In the comics, he was trained as an assassin by his mother, without Batman ever knowing of his existence. Whether through a night of passion or drugging and harvesting of his bat semen depends on the writer. Upon finally meeting his father, Damian became inspired to give up killing and follow his example, becoming the newest boy to carry the mantle of Robin. In the show, we first see him as a seemingly regular boy being raised by Bruce, while the comic version is very stoic for his age, referring to Batman as father, and taking himself and his new role as Robin incredibly seriously. The show version talks like a little kid, also wanting to emulate his father, but in a way a kid dressing up in his dad's clothes and pretending to go to work does. While the comic version has a nearly permanent scowl on his face, the show version almost always has a big goofy grin. And instead of becoming Robin, Damian in this show dresses up as Little Batman and goes out to comically defend Gotham while Batman is away. Honestly, if this had been about Dick Grayson instead, I think the personality and characterization would have worked a lot better, honestly. And speaking of, in the comics, though it's not a traditional family, Damian has a lot of what are basically brothers in Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake. However, none of them are in here, and there's no evidence that they even exist. Instead, this Damian spent times bonding with literal OCs and random obscure characters the writers decided to put on the main cast. So, basically everything's the exact opposite, and this just isn't the same character at all. But now we leave the how the hell are these even adaptations section of this ranking with number 22, Copperhead. In the comics, there have been a few Copperheads, with most of them sharing in common being a contortionist who either wears a snake costume or looks like a snake. And despite wearing a snake costume in this show, the one they chose to adapt is not one of the ones who wears one. The female version of Copperhead, this one is based on, was created for the Arkham Origins video game, and was one of the master assassins hired to kill Batman, and was later adapted into comics with basically the same gimmick. Both comic and game versions are contortionist master assassins who specialize in poisons and wear claws to inject that poison into their targets, able to kill almost instantaneously. In the show, she's a dumpy middle-aged woman in a snake costume. She was a villain, but has reformed and lives in a group home run by the social outreach program Ex-Villain, or E-Vil. We don't know what kinds of crimes she committed in this universe, but if she's anything like the character she's based on, she's likely poisoned and murdered many people. And in this show, even she talks fondly about how her pet snake ate her parents, so I don't know how reformed she actually is. At 21, we move up to Rumble. In the show, Rumble, or Rumbler as it sounded like to me, is a member of that same stupid girl villain group as Cyclone was. In comics, though, Rumble actually is a villain, and he was a member of the new Fearsome Five and helped fight the Teen Titans using never clearly defined vibrational powers. He is never named in his first appearance and beaten up in the very next issue. Then a year later he returned, but this time the writer remembered to say his name, and he was then punched into the ocean and never seen again. So, being a villain and having a similar costume are the similarities, and he would have been much lower for gender swapping him, except for the fact that we never actually saw what he looked like under the costume in comics, so for all we know, he was a fat middle-aged woman like in the show. Up to 20 now, we've got Volcana. Volcana originated outside the comics as a villain in Superman the Animated Series, and later appeared in Justice League. She was then adapted in the comics, but without any of the things that made her cool in the show, and she just kind of disappeared. And for God knows what reason, they decided to make that one of the main characters in a show about the Bat family. Both versions are Claire Selton, who learned that they had fire abilities at a young age and were sent by her parents to a seemingly altruistic facility to help her learn to control them. The facility turned out to be a front to train metahuman soldiers, and eventually Claire escaped and used her abilities to turn to a life of crime. Randomly, this version is all the same in the original version and this show. So, see? These assholes can adapt characters well when they friggin' want to. The reason she's not higher on the list is that the show version diverges in the strangest way I've ever seen. After committing crimes with her partner, Killer Frost, she was left for dead. Batman found her and brought her dying body to an apparently nearby Lazarus pit to revive her. The pit somehow de-aged her body to that of a teen, wiping away all of her memories from her life after that moment. And then Batman decides to not only immediately adopt her, but also reveal his secret identity to her. So her entire character is your basic moody teenage girl who's mean to everyone around her while desperately wanting to be understood and accepted. My guess for this character is that someone working on the show thought that she was cool back in the DC animated universe, and so instead of using fan-beloved characters like Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Barbara Gordon, Cassandra Cain, Carrie Kelly, or any number of Batman family-associated characters, the writer instead grabbed up his favorite obscure DCAU character and tossed her into this thing without giving a crap about anyone watching. And number 19 in this kids show, we have beloved convicted rapist, Dr. Light. Arthur Light in both BatFam and the comics was a scientist with a suit that allowed him to manipulate and control light. In the comics, he uses this power to commit crimes and face the Justice League, Teen Titans, and many heroes, many times, in relatively innocent comic book adventures through the years. But years later, one of the DC's greatest villains, edgy modern writers, got a hold of him and had him sexually assault Sue Dibney as a commentary on the Silver Age not being as squeaky clean and innocent as it was initially portrayed. We don't know his backstory in the show, but at some point in the past, he fought Batman and was convinced to retire. Later coming to the Evil Rehabilitation Center to get help ending his evil ways from the organization's founder, Alicia Pennyworth. And no, Alicia, don't open that door. That's Dr. Light. Don't let him in while you're alone in there. And though it's never revealed if he in fact then violently forced himself on Alicia, we do see a happy montage of him doing neighborly things to let us know he's all rehabilitated. But when an old device he invented activates that could suck all life from the world, he goes to deactivate it before it can fall into the wrong hands, dying in the process. Alicia starts wearing one of Dr. Light's old suits and becomes the hero Bright to find the device afterwards. When we see it in flashbacks, his costume's pretty much what he wears in the comics, and when not glowing, Alicia's costume looks like a version of his as well, just without the cape. However, I do wonder why they wouldn't grab the Camille Hoshi version of Dr. Light instead, as someone Alicia could be inspired by and continue the mantle of. I do not really understand why they'd pick him to put into a heroic role in this show, as he's got quite a bit of baggage, in case some kid who watches this chooses to read up on some of the characters in this show online, but oh wait, I know, it's because they didn't do any goddamn research. Silly me. Now up to 18, we have Ra's al Ghul. In the comics, Ra's al Ghul is the virtually immortal leader of the League of Assassins, who tries to impose his own version of balance on the world through violent terroristic acts he sees as merely population control. He maintains a longer life through the use of Lazarus pits, ancient pools that can rejuvenate the near-dead, though with the various negative side effects such as temporary insanity. He is one of Batman's greatest villains, and though they are morally polar opposites, they share a form of respect for each other, with Ra's often wishing to make Bruce his successor and often referring to him as the detective in reference to what he sees as his keen mind. In the show, he's a cartoon green ghost that talks with a Dracula accent. While the comic version is one of Batman's more complex villains morally, the show version is just a cliché supervillain, cackling about evil and so on, while everyone ignores him and treats him as if he's completely harmless. The most evil thing we ever see Rage doing is switching sugar for salt. Both versions are the fathers of Talia and the grandfather of Damian. Though while in the comics he sees Damian as little more than a tool, in the show he loves his grandson, calls him little pet names, and always helps out when it'll help Damian. Despite the whole being a ghost thing, his design is pretty much lifted from the comics with the same pointed facial hair and the cape he often wears. At 17, we come to Man-Bat. So in the comics and show, Kirk Langstrom was a scientist who turned into a bat creature. In the comics, this was by testing a formula to help enhance human abilities to bat-like levels. He loses much of his sanity upon transforming, and Batman must fight him and help reverse the effects. Though due to various reasons, he's transformed back into Man-Bat many times since, becoming a recurring enemy to Batman, but also sometimes an ally when he can retain enough of his human side, with Langstrom usually working to develop a permanent cure at all times. In the show, we don't know what the hell his deal is. He's some weird, gross, fat bat guy who lives at Bruce's mansion. No one really talks to him or acknowledges his existence most of the time. We learn later that he lives in the attic and is a huge nerd and possibly a weeb, as he collects XP Pokemon cards and has anime-type figures and posters around. He also claims to have been a dark anti-hero in the 90s, and though he did have a very short miniseries in the 90s, he was not a Dark Venom-style anti-hero, so I don't know what the hell they're talking about there. While most of the rehabilitated villains in this show are completely random and never actually tried to change their ways, Man-Bat actually does. both trying to return to a normal life and helping to fight against crime in Gotham and beyond from time to time, both of which he does in the show. Had they told us anything about the guy, he likely could have gone higher. Up to 16 now with Killer Frost. In the show, Killer Frost is the partner of Volcana before she was turned into a kid. They pulled crimes together until Frost tried to kill her so she could leave a robbery with all of the loot. There are a few Killer Frosts in comics, but this one is said to be Caitlin Snow. I already know they did no research, but this is one of the worst names to pick because it's the one who almost immediately reforms and becomes a hero. She was a scientist who was involved in an accident that caused her to be able to generate ice, but now also craved heat to survive. While madly searching for more sources of heat to absorb, she was captured and incarcerated, soon after being inducted into Task Force X, and after showing herself not to actually be evil, was forced to be released by Batman, joining the Justice League of America. Pretty much the only reason she's even this high is that her costume is pretty accurate and she has ice powers. At 15 we come to Giganta. In the show, Giganta is a giant woman who only ever says, Giganta. Oh, hilarious. She's one of the rehabilitated criminals of evil, and we never see her face because she's so tall. The rest of the rehabilitated villains in this Batman show are Batman villains, while Giganta is one of Wonder Woman's most well-known and iconic villains, so no idea what's going on there. She wears a similar Jungle Girl dress as she used to wear in the comics and has red hair. At 14 we come to Toyman. There are multiple Toymans in the comics, but like with Killer Frost, they decided to grab up the one who isn't a villain and toss him into a villainous role. In comics, Hiro Okamura was a young Japanese super genius who specializes in robotics and has teamed up with Superman, Batman, and other heroes. In the show, he's a weird, greasy, ugly kid who's stealing what are basically Pokemon cards from collectors, in order to use the advanced material that makes up 5 of the most rarest ones to power a robot to destroy the city. Yeah, that's the plot of an episode. The only similarities are a passion for robots and having black hair. At 13, we move to Vicky Vale. Despite looking absolutely nothing like Vicky Vale, she is a reporter in Gotham City, which is sadly enough to get you this high on the list with this show. However, she's usually portrayed as a newspaper reporter or a photojournalist depending on the time period, not normally a news anchor, and is usually one of Bruce Wayne's major love interests. And though they meet in the show, there is no implication of that. And thank God, because I did not want to watch any of these hideous character designs even imply that they would hook up. At 12, we come to Killer Moth. Another of the rehabilitated villains living in the group home in the show. He's just a normal, friendly guy, and we learn pretty much nothing about him, except that his parents didn't think his moth costume looked like a moth, which is the kind of hilarious low-hanging fruit observations we've come to expect out of this show. In the comics, Killer Moth originally tried to become an anti-Batman other criminals could hire to help them pull crimes off and escape capture. This didn't really work out, and after being defeated by Batman, he's tried many times to build a successful criminal career, only to be defeated again and again, until he eventually said fuck it, sold his soul to Neron, and turned into a horrific moth monster. Though has since returned to his old colorful identity, sometimes portrayed more successfully and competent, sometimes not. While most of the villains chosen for a comedic role in this reformed villain group make no goddamn sense, Killer Moth is a fine choice, as his tacky, memorable costume and virtually failed villain career make him an ideal character for a comedy show. At 11, we move up to King Tut, the last of the reformed villains. Versions of King Tut have been in comics, but this version is clearly based on the original version that appeared much earlier in the 60s Batman series. In the show, Egypt expert Professor McEllery is hit on the head and awakens to believe he is the reincarnation of King Tut, soon after dressing the part and attempting to take over the city before being stopped by Batman. Though helped to remember who he really is, later blows on the head cause him to revert to this personality. There have been a few adaptations of the character into comics, usually also believing they are a reincarnation of an ancient pharaoh or deity. In the show, he looks similar in build and costume to the show one, and seems to believe himself as a deity incarnate, though never specific about what that means. I don't know why he's part of this reformed villain group when, like the show and comic versions, he's clearly severely mentally unwell and should really be in a care facility for his own good as well as the good of all of those around him. Up to the top 10 most well-adapted BatFam characters. Oh God, is that what we're doing here? Jesus. All right, starting at 10 with Clayface. So, there have been a number of Clayfaces through the years, like Basil Carlo, Matt Hagen, Sandra Fuller, but for no reason I can understand, this show decided to go with the most obscure one of all, Todd Russell. In the show, we see that the warehouse manager of Wayne Enterprises is named Ansem Goodberry, which Claire realizes is the alias of Todd Russell, who she once pulled a crime with, and after being confronted by Batman, reveals himself and fights as Clayface. In the comics, the Todd Russell Clayface is not a Batman villain. He primarily faced Catwoman. And while he does have basically the same look and powers as more well-known Clayfaces, he's most well-known for being driven insane by the process that turned him into a monster and psychotically murdering prostitutes, something he does not do in the show, at least on screen. But sounds like the perfect kind of villain for Alicia's Reformation program based on the other villains we see her working with. Well, right, now up to 9 with Batman. So, while I hate this show and everything it represents, and I think most of the characters are some of the worst bastardizations I've ever seen, besides being portrayed as a goofy out-of-touch dad and that horribly designed beard, Batman's done fine for what this show is. His parents died at a young age. He has a hatred of crime and a strong moral code of right and wrong. He's taught Damian a moral code so strict that he won't even sneak out of one movie in a theater to go to another because he says that's wrong. This Batman is clearly portrayed as the good guy, hero of the city, fighter of crime. There is an effort to make him feel like Batman, even if it's a goofier version. Though they usually play it up for jokes, he's incredibly well organized and keeps strict schedules for himself and those around him, making him almost a parody of the curmudgeonly, uptight, fastidious personality Batman's become known for. You've got a utility belt, batarangs, the Batcave, Batmobile, Bat Signal, all the Bat things. He's got an Alfred, runs Wayne Enterprises. You know all the Batman stuff. He's got all of it. And he even goes by his Matches Malone identity when going undercover at his own company, an identity he uses in the comics to get information in the criminal underworld. The biggest differences are his relationship with Damian, which is a lot more distant in the comics, while in the show they share a deep and loving father-son bond, learning valuable life lessons together, hugging and having a father-son fist bump that they do together while chanting the na-na-na-na-na-na-na 60s Batman tune. He also has a father/moody teen-daughter relationship with his adopted daughter Volcana, which is a bizarre sentence to say and is of course not a thing in the comics. He's shown to have been close childhood friends with Alicia, who is just made up for this show, so not a thing. And I guarantee if comic Bruce Wayne were haunted by the ghost of Ra's al Ghul, he'd call friggin' Constantine immediately to help him exorcise that shit from his house. One of the biggest differences is that he's a lot less confident than Batman usually is, often worrying about his relationship with Damian and the rest of the family overtly, instead of bottling it all up inside and focusing it on his work, as he does in the comics, and stressing about things like missing Damian's field trip, or worries about why Alicia hid her identity as Bright from him when they promised not to keep secrets. This version of Batman also has a lot more free time on his hands, as he pretty much eliminated crime in anticipation of having his kid. But we see that it's been returning to Gotham recently. And while dipshits who know nothing about the character seem to think Batman just gets off on beating up criminals forever, in the comics it's been shown many times that if he thinks a villain can be rehabilitated, he does what he can to help them, as his only goal is to eliminate crime. So both versions share that in common as well. Basically, if I counted Bruce Wayne and Batman as two different characters on this list, Bruce would fall quite a bit lower, while Batman would go higher. But I don't need any more frickin' spots on this list, Jesus. So, let's move on to 8 with Livewire. Another character who originated in Superman the Animated Series. In her original appearance, Livewire was a shock jock radio host who often crapped on Superman. After being struck by lightning, she is transformed and gains powerful electrical abilities, turning her derision of Superman professional by becoming a supervillain. In BatFam, she's one of the many villains of Gotham Batman must face. So clearly Superman in this universe is doing a fucking terrible job, since all of his villains keep escaping to go fight Batman in Gotham. We don't know anything about her in this show, but she's got the same color scheme and a similar costume, just with the same hideously dumpy design as everyone else in this show. Moving up to 7 with Mr. Freeze. In BatFam, Mr. Freeze is just another of the villains in Gotham, who we just see committing a robbery alongside henchmen and then fights Batman. Like the comics, he has a cryosuit and uses an ice gun, with the major differences being an ironic Hawaiian shirt he wears over all of it. I ain't such an asshole to bitch about that. I wish there were more dumb jokes like that in the show, as it's supposed to be an absurdist comedy. However, it's not accurate to the comics, so I will be pedantic about it. This version makes non-stop ice puns in reference to the infamous Batman and Robin movie version. But the puns in Batman and Robin were much more surreal and entertaining, while these are just kind of phoned in. Though it is ice to get more evidence that the inspirations for the writers are just random Batman movies that they've seen across the years, and not anything from the comics. At 6 we come to Commissioner Gordon. Superficially, he's got all the aspects of Gordon that you'd expect. Police commissioner, mustache, glasses, overcoat. As he's well known to be in the comics and most all adaptations, he's an ally and supporter of Batman in the police department. The major difference is, of course, this is a goofball comedy show, so Gordon is an awkward idiot, unable to do anything to help Gotham except pick up the phone that calls Batman. And like the comics, he's an honest cop, unwilling to even allow someone to break the no outside food policy while in a theater. As far as dumb comedy versions of characters go, like Batman, Gordon's fine, and I'd be a pedantic asshole to nitpick about him too much. However, since he's in here, and it's a Bat Family show, it's asinine to me that his daughter, Barbara Gordon, isn't in the show as either Batgirl or Oracle. Whatever. And now entering, what at least, maybe 10 of you are still here to see? With the top 5 most well-adapted BatFam characters, starting with Alfred. Despite being one of the most hideous designs I've ever seen, and looking nothing like any Alfred most people are familiar with, this version of Alfred is basically how he's usually portrayed in the comics in all the rest of the ways. He's a British butler who served the Wayne family since Bruce was a child and looked after him after his parents died, serving as a surrogate parental role. He takes care of the mansion and Batcave despite his age and takes joy and pride in his work. He knows of Batman's secret identity and often acts as a voice of wisdom to Bruce and the other members of the Bat family, and takes care of all those he cares about both physically and mentally. Though not used in the modern day, he was portrayed to have a niece in the past. However, while the show version is named Alicia, the comic version was named Daphne, and the two share absolutely nothing in common, with the name of his niece in the show likely being a reference to the actress who played his niece in Batman and Robin. Though she's also nothing like that version of his niece either, so I don't see the point of the reference. And now up to 4, we've got Killer Croc. In the comics, Waylon Jones was born with a condition that caused him to have a somewhat reptilian appearance, and greatly increased his durability and strength as well. Due to a difficult upbringing, as well as a lifetime of ridicule and hatred due to his condition, Waylon developed a violent and cynical outlook of the world, eventually using his rage and abilities to become a major criminal in the Gotham underworld, facing Batman many times. Due to differing reasons, his reptilian appearance as well as his mental state has shifted drastically from era to era, sometimes thinking and appearing more human and sometimes being portrayed very monstrously. In the show, he's a big guy who looks like a crocodile and fights Batman, and here, that's good enough to get this high. Well, oh boy, here we are, the top 3 most well-adapted Bat Family characters. I bet all 6 of you still here are excited as heck. And number 3, we have Solomon Grundy. In comics, Grundy was originally a villain of the Green Lantern Alan Scott in the 40s, though he's returned many times over the decades and fought the heroes of the Justice Society and Justice League. Eventually, he makes his way back to Gotham and is now often used as a member of Batman's rogues gallery in the modern day. Though his origin has been told many different ways, he's most usually portrayed as having been a man named Cyrus Gold who was killed and dumped in Slaughter Swamp, decades later re-emerging from the swamp as an undead creature without memory of his true identity. And no matter how many times he is killed or destroyed, he always revives and rises again, oftentimes with a vastly different level of strength, intelligence, and morality, often heard uttering the words, "Born on Monday," in reference to the poem of his namesake. In the show, he's a big, pale zombie guy who fights Batman alongside a group of villains. We learn nothing about him, and all he says is, "Batman," one time. He looks recognizable as Grundy, and he doesn't do anything to contradict any of his major elements, so top 3. Now at number 2, we have the Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter in comics is Jervis Tetch, a brilliant but insane man obsessed with both Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and hats in general, which he bases his entire criminal identity around. His level of insanity differs from time to time, sometimes operating as a more straightforward criminal, sometimes as a dangerously delusional deviant psychopath. He develops advanced mind control technology that he places inside of hats that he forces people to wear so he can control them, often making them assist him in his crimes. In the show, this is basically just how he's portrayed, except a lot less insane. Though his appearance drastically changes through the years, more so than most villains, he's most often shown as a short man with an overbite who wears an oversized suit and top hat, oftentimes green, emulating the character he is inspired by from Alice in Wonderland. And this is exactly how he looks in the show. He uses mind control technology to control guards and others as he commits his crimes, and he fights against Batman. And unlike a lot of the villains in the show, he's not just one of many attacking at once. He's actually portrayed as one of Batman's major villains. The major difference is that this version has a daughter who assists him in crimes known as the Sad Hatter, with it later revealed that he had pushed her into a life of crime. So mind control hats, Alice in Wonderland theme, criminal, and enemy of Batman, all enough to get this high. But here we are. The moment at least 3 of you have been waiting for. The character who gets the not particular prestigious title of the most well-adapted character in BatFam is the Joker. It's a bit anticlimactic, but there's not a lot to say here. It's hard to get the Joker wrong. Through the decades, he's looked and acted so many different ways that you could toss pretty much anything up on screen and call it a Joker, and there'd be some obscure precedent in his long history of comics and other adaptations. However, as much crap as I give this show, the Joker is done just fine. I have no real complaints. He first appeared in the Merry Little Batman movie that this show is based on, and he looks pretty much the same as in there, just less well animated. He looks like a cartoon Joker, dresses like a cartoon Joker. And though I hate the style of this show, there's not anything for me to nitpick, as he's been portrayed with longer hair as he is in here, and while everyone has got horrifically extended jaws in this show, the Joker is actually well known for having a long, creepy face. He tells Damian his backstory about growing up and being abandoned by a father who loved to pull pranks on him. But Joker's been known to tell all kinds of BS about his past, and the story seems specifically tailored to manipulate Damian's abandonment worries, so I don't take it any more seriously than any other Joker origin. Joker's acted many different ways throughout the years, shifting and changing to match the times and what Batman's like in those times. This version seems like a mixture of the Silver Age prankster Joker, with a teeny bit of the modern-style apocalyptic mass murderer Joker thrown in. With his plans to torture Gotham with over-the-top pranks on April Fool's Day and then use a device he's stolen to drive the whole city and the entire world into an insane, violent frenzy that would end in likely billions of deaths. He also seems completely obsessed with Batman, as he manipulates and seemingly brainwashes Batman's son, Little Batman, into becoming his protege, Little Joker, and enacts his entire plan to prank the world to culminate in Batman's son pressing the Doomsday button right in front of Batman as the ultimate torture. We also see that he's top dog in Gotham and Batman's greatest enemy. So, hey, if the whole show would have been thought of like they used him here, I think it would have been a little bit better, honestly. It wouldn't be my cup of tea, but at least it could have been a Batman show. And there we go. At least 2 of you made it to the end of this ranking. Congratulations. If so, let me know with a comment of, I watched the entire frickin' BatFam ranking video and all I got was this stupid comment that this a-hole told me to write as a trick for cheap engagement for the algorithm. And speaking of cheap engagement, hit that subscribe if you ain't already, and make sure to hit that bell. If you watch through all of this just because you're a big BatFam fan, let me know if you think my assessment is fair, or if I'm missing something that makes any of these characters or this show the greatest Batman cartoon of the modern era. And if you're sitting there pissed as hell I didn't do Poison Ivy or Bane because they weren't in this show, even though they were in the Merry Little Batman movie, make sure to get this video to, 37 million views, and I'll make an expanded list for you. And now I've spent like 50 hours straight thinking about nothing but BatFam, and I think my brain is going to friggin' explode. And you know, a wise man once said, all it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. And doing this video, I think I may have reached it, so if you'll excuse me...